Okay, the line is open. We are recording this session and we'll have hopefully people joining us soon. Just taking this few seconds that we have before we start the session to remind everyone to mute your phones. Also to the attendees that are slowly joining the session. And we will start in a few seconds. Good morning, everyone here in California. Good afternoon to our audience joining us from Israel and from other places around the world. My name is Sharon Vanek, and I'm very happy for the opportunity to host this webinar today. I'm the Executive Director of the California-Israel Chamber of Commerce. We are a nonprofit organization that's been around for over 20 years, providing opportunities for businesses, research institutions, government offices, and so on to meet and discuss opportunities of collaborations to foster innovation between California and Israel. Today, we are hosting this fantastic discussion about biodesign. Before we start, I just want to remind our audience that this event is being recorded and will be available later on our YouTube channel. It's also being broadcasted live on our Facebook page. The moderator of today is Dr. Josh Makower. Before I hand the one to Josh, I want to thank our panel speakers that will share their insights about biodesign and the collaboration between Rambam Hospital in Israel and the Stanford Hospital here in California. I want to thank, first of all, Dean Miner from the Stanford Medical School. If you can tell us maybe a sentence or two about yourself before we start. Good morning, Dean Miner.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Lloyd Miner. I'm the Dean of Medicine at Stanford. I've been in this role now for almost 8 years. I came to Stanford from Johns Hopkins, where I'd been for 19 years. I came here to Stanford in 2012. It's been a great privilege and pleasure to work with Professor Beyar and Professor Halberthal on the Rambam Stanford collaboration. And I'm looking forward to today's meeting and to even deeper collaborations between Stanford and Rambam in the future. Thank you for organizing today's webinar.
Thank you so much. And I would like to also introduce Professor Rafi Beyar. He's a Professor Emeritus at the Rambam and the Technion. Good afternoon, Rafi.
Good afternoon. Great to be here with all of you. I'm the former CEO of Rambam. I'm currently helping continue to develop the hospital. I'm also involved in high-tech companies and with high-tech funds in Israel. And also on behalf of Dr. Halbert, I extend a welcome to all of you because he's tied in a very intense meeting about COVID-19 with the Minister of Health. So he cannot join us this time.
Thank you so much, Rafi. And I want to move to Dr. Richard Popp, who is Professor Emeritus at the Stanford School of Medicine. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. wonderful group of people that you've assembled. My background is as a cardiologist for many years, and eventually came into the dean's office for just before Dean Miner did, and eventually helped Josh Makower and especially Paul Yock start the Biodesign program. And I've been involved with it for the last 20 years. Happy to see it grow the way it has.
Thank you so much. And the next is Dr. Yona Vaisbuch. He's the Program and Clinical Director of the Rambam Biodesign Program. Good afternoon, Yona.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here. I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor specializing in ear surgery and skull base. And after graduating from my residency, I spent 4 years at Stanford doing my training for the fellowship, and then staying another 2 years as an attending. Been part of the Biodesign program, and happy to be here and excited about the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaisbuch, and I want to move to Dr. Tahel Altman. She's a Stanford Biodesign Fellowship graduate, and she will also talk a little bit about her experience. Hi, Tahel. We cannot hear you. You're on mute.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Actually, I'm an internal medicine physician, and I was in the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship about 7 years ago. I'm very excited to see again Josh, Rich, Popp, and it was an amazing experience for me. And since then, I'm trying my best to continue this process of innovation, and I established several companies, and I'm happy to help spread, when Yona told me about this program, to help and spread this amazing program here in Israel.
Fantastic. And last but not least, we have Dr. Janene Fuerch. She's from the Stanford Biodesign. Welcome and good morning.
Hi, I'm very honored to be here and invited. I'm an assistant professor of neonatology at Stanford Children's Health. I took the Innovation Fellowship from 2016 to 17, and it definitely dramatically changed my career trajectory. I was able to start Women's Health Company out of the fellowship, and now I also teach in biodesign and teach the faculty fellowship, as well as involved in several initiatives around pediatric device development, diversity, and health equity. So thanks so much for the invite.
No worries, of course. And Dr. Josh Makower, our moderator for this session today. Thank you so much for taking the lead on this discussion. Dr. Makower is a co-founder and advisor for the Stanford Biodesign. I think I'll let you, handle the discussion from now onwards.
Thanks very much.
Floor is yours.
Appreciate it, and thanks to this esteemed panel. And we're going to discuss the collaboration between Stanford and Rambam. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a serial med tech entrepreneur, co-founded the Stanford Biodesign program a little over 20 years ago with Paul Yock, and continue on the faculty as an adjunct professor. I'm also a general partner with New Enterprise Associates, which is one of the largest venture funds in the country, and still involved with the incubator called ExploreMed, which is where I've created a number of interesting companies. So why don't we launch right in with Dean Miner. I think a great place to start would be just to start with your view of global collaborations in general on a sort of macro and micro level, and what your vision is for the Stanford Rambam collaboration.
Well, thanks a lot, Josh. I think global collaborations are exceptionally important. They're a bit challenging now, in particular with COVID-19. On the other hand, the fact that we have a global pandemic illustrates very tangibly and tragically the effects of an interconnected world. We can't view we can't view ourselves as a microcosm. We're a part of a much greater global community. And that's particularly true in biomedicine, where there is so much innovation going on, yes, in the United States, but an enormous amount of innovation in Israel. And that really brings us to, well, how did this come about? And Rafi, Beyar, and I were reintroduced. I think we'd actually met years ago at Johns Hopkins, but we were reintroduced 6 or 7 years ago by our mutual friend and colleague, Bill Brody, who was former president of Johns Hopkins and former president of the Salk Institute. And we met here, I think, first here in the Bay Area, and then I made a trip to visit Rafi and colleagues at Rambam. And Rich Popp had really begun this interaction and collaboration. I'm sure Rich can comment on that. So many things that are good here at Stanford actually were innovations that came from Rich. And I'm extremely grateful for what Rich has done for Stanford over the years and now. And it seemed that we had some collaborations going on between Stanford and Rambam and the Technion, but we felt like we had an opportunity to deepen those collaborations a lot. And I really have treasured every trip I've made to Israel, the I guess 4 trips I've made in the past 4 or 5 years, and I've learned a tremendous amount every time, both from Rambam and the Technion and also from the very robust early stage company ecosystem in Israel. And I think there's just so much we can and should be doing together. And I'm pleased that we're getting it started off with biodesign and other types of exchanges. In the end, you know, everything we do at Stanford, everything that is being done at Rambam and the Technion, everything's dependent upon people. And the success of this collaboration is very much dependent upon our people as well. And so our job in leadership is to provide opportunities and to make sure that people who would like to pursue collaborations have an avenue with which they can develop those collaborations. But in the end, it's about the interactions among the people from Stanford, the people from Rambam and Technion that are going to make this phenomenally successful. So I'm really pleased that we're having this webinar today and look forward to a time when we can travel back and forth to each institution.
Absolutely. Great comments. Professor Beyar, maybe you can share your vision of the collaboration and sort of how you think it's going to impact the future, and maybe even comment about, you know, why Haifa for this to start.
Well, same as Lloyd, I'm very, very pleased with this collaboration. You know, we met during Lloyd's visit to Israel, and we had shared this idea. And 4 or 5 years ago, and the idea continued to flourish and succeed. And I think that this was the first step. But even going back backwards many years, you know, I've been involved. I've really combined engineering and medicine together from the early parts of my career, starting at the Technion, biomedical engineering, then at Johns Hopkins with Mike Weisfeld and others doing also biomedical engineering research. And coming back to Israel was very early days. There was not much startup. It was not a startup nation at that time. I remember when I came back to Israel, people asked me, why do you go to the Technion? Go and treat the patients. Why engineering? I mean, I got so many questions. But over the years, I think that, and we ran a constant meeting. I think, Rich Popp, you've been to our ICI meeting in cardiovascular innovations once, and Biodesign was there in that meeting. Paul Yock came to present. I don't know, Josh, if you had the chance to come and visit in that meeting. If you didn't have, we will make it in the future. And Biodesign was there. And actually, even with my colleague, Chaim Lotan, who started Biodesign program affiliate or some kind of a program related like that at the Hebrew University. And with the idea of Lloyd, I was really embraced to take this as a great opportunity. Israel is really been bubbling with innovations in the last 2 decades. I've written a paper about that in the Lancet Health in Israel issue about how the growth, what were the reasons for Israel to become a center for innovations, many reasons, and I won't go into all of them. but there is a, and the drive comes from all sides. It comes within the hospital, ideas that come from physicians. It comes also from outside of the hospital, from engineers who have ideas and want to continue. It comes sometimes from companies themselves, and it also comes from universities, obviously, that pursue this idea. But it came bottom up, not in any organized fashion. And one of the problems of all the startup companies in Israel has been the relatively low success after the initial funding. I mean, and I've been involved in that. I founded at Rambam. Rambam is a unique institution, and Haifa also, and I will mention that as well. Haifa has a technion there with 21 engineering faculties, the biggest engineering, obviously, university in Israel. Rambam is the biggest hospital in the north, tightly associated with the technion. So really there's a very good ground for the combination of medicine and engineering and the idea of innovations and engineering-related innovations. On top of that, in the bigger circle, we have the University of Haifa, we have the high-tech industry. I founded an incubator 5 years ago, MindUp, which deals with digital health and medical devices. So really a great ground for, first of all, develop collaborations, develop people who will take it as their step forward. And there were also programs, both at the university, both at the hospital, both at the Technion, to try and teach innovations. But there was nothing like a biodesign program like that you really teach in a very unique way to try and focus on and identify the right program and grow it from the very beginning and get it to a much bigger success that we want it to be. So I think we thought that really bringing it together with Stanford will be a great part of the Rambam Stanford collaboration. Now the Rambam Stanford collaboration is beyond biodesign. It's not only, there are 5 programs there or 6, data science, oncology, trauma, and others, biodesign in one of them. And I think there's so much to do among us. And I think that's a great opportunity. And in that opportunity, we got an advantage that Yona was just finishing his fellowship and about to come back to Israel. And we had to snap him back to the north. He was originally from the center of Israel. And I hope he likes the north of Israel. It's a great opportunity to have him with us and build the program with all our friends, with the faculty around us. So I think there is really a great room for innovations. There are lots of innovations. I'm seeing companies at all phases now, from very early phases, from the idea up to a maturating company which thrives for money and for direction and for markets. And it's especially challenging, by the way, during this COVID year. I mean, really especially challenging. And that's something that we also learn through this very difficult year that we're going through. But it's been really a great opportunity. We were supposed to visit Stanford sometimes in November, but it doesn't seem that it will be November 2000. Maybe it will be November 2001. 2020. Probably it will be a year from now, hopefully. But it's really a great program. I look forward to see it progresses.
Yeah, I think those are great comments. And I actually do think that a rigorous application of some of the principles of biodesign has a very good chance of improving the probability of success for these startups. And having seen many startups over the years through the various roles I've had, I think I agree. And this is a very insightful intervention that I think is going to be very helpful. So very excited about that. Dr. Popp, maybe you can comment a little bit on your perspective on, of course, on this collaboration, but also maybe even more globally on how you see biodesign impacting, global health, and maybe you have a few examples of those to share.
Well, thanks, Josh. I'm extremely pleased to be part of this program, but also part of Biodesign. Josh and Paul Yock started this 20 years ago. Josh came upon a way to look first at what the patient needs, what the doctors need, go through a very formal and rigorous process, which has now been instituted. And this biodesign process is surprisingly effective. About half of our graduates are our product. And these are leaders that are in the biomedical field for sure. But I mean, it's very hard to get some parameters. I talked to Paul the other day, he told me that 51 companies have come out of biodesign. And as a previous venture capitalist, I can tell you what I expect for success. Only 2 have failed. All the rest have been successful, are still ongoing, etc. So that is that's a major accomplishment. And I think that's been the reason that we started, the Indian government came to us, we started a program there. It's now running on its own. Singapore, Japan, Ireland, now Israel, they're all going to take advantage of this wonderful program that Josh and Paul started. There's a textbook that is used by many, many groups within the United States. And it all comes down to finding out in the local area what is really needed by the patients, by the physicians and the patients. And for example, there's a specific problem in Japan with rehabilitation after myocardial infarction. Patients don't want to go outside their house. They are very reluctant. Our biodesign fellows have come up with a rehabilitation system that is in the home and is so successful that the government now sponsors it. Janene has a couple examples herself from the pediatric area and recognized pediatrics is hard to make a business out of because the market usually is not huge, but they've been able to do it because of the terrific needs that have had. I'm sure that in Israel, you know, there's no lack of talent in Israel. I mean, I have run a program for 35 years bringing doctors from Israel to Stanford, and I know the quality of the people in Israel. The issue is the focus on the patient, making sure in this process you have something that's really a viable company, which then gets the product out to the patient. So I'm very encouraged that by adopting this process, Yona was very insightful in deciding to take this on. I admire what he's done, and I think he's going to be very successful. So good luck, Yona. I'll turn it back to you, Josh.
Thanks for those comments. And maybe just to further on that, Dr. Fuerch can provide perspective, because certainly in the classic medical school way of seeing, doing, and teaching, Dr. Fuerch has done all those things, you know, from being a student in the program to actually creating her own startup and now teaching in the program. So maybe you can offer a perspective on from all those angles, Dr. Fuerch.
Sure, happy to. I think that the program's amazing. Certainly focusing on a need is something that I find I had trouble with and my students have trouble with. As a physician specifically, we think we understand the need after a very cursory glance because we've dealt with it. But when you really, really dig in, it takes a long time and it takes a lot, looking at a lot of different perspectives to truly understand what a need is and what a good need is. And how that can actually get to patient care. So the reason that I started in biodesign was really because I was having a research career and I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I was actually developing medical devices, but didn't realize I was. And then realized that in academia, it just culminated in a paper, and that really wasn't enough for me. It didn't make me feel like I was actually impacting patient care. So to be able to go back, ask the right question from the very beginning and spend a lot of time there, to be able to figure out that if I was asking the right question, if I could solve that problem, would it have tremendous impact on patients? That was what the program really drove for me. And that's what I try to remind my students of all the time. That process is especially important in pediatrics, as Dr. Popp and Makower mentioned, especially because you're taking a small market. And we tend to, as pediatricians, ask really small questions, or even as academicians, sometimes ask really small niche questions that are very interesting to us, but that doesn't always work. So in a small market, sometimes you have to ask bigger questions, but applying the biodesign process to ask the right question in the right market has been really, really helpful. And we found several different ways to make it economically efficient. So there's several examples of a couple different companies that I've been involved with, but others from Biodesign also have, that have taken things from the asthma action plan that Dr. Bronwyn Harris developed a company called Tuyo around that was acquired by Apple. They only raised $1.1 million, but have been able to have a large impact. We noticed in neonates, the way that their umbilical catheters are secured are by the nurses manufacturing tape and adhering them to the catheter and then sticking them to the abdomen. I could show you pictures, but it's quite shocking. And then they're right next to the diaper. So as you can imagine, those rates of infection are much higher than the rates of adults with central catheters. And so we were able to develop it's a company called Novonate and Life Bubble, but goes right around the umbilical cord. It secures it, it protects it. And now we've been able to show that it decreases migration rates with the raise of $1 million. So just trying to be capitally efficient, but asking the right questions and the right problems. And then the women's health company that I started around birth control pills as well is a global problem that can certainly be addressed on a very global scale.
Outstanding. Great comments. Thank you. So maybe I'll turn it over to Dr. Vaisbuch. I think it sounds like you're at the center of the effort on the grounds, hands-on here at Rambam, making this happen, and obviously a driver in Startup Nation. Maybe you can tell us about your vision for the program and a little bit more about Startup Nation, and really ground us in sort of the next steps.
I'm sorry, sure. Thank you, Josh. So maybe starting from Rambam in the position of as the ambassador bringing biodesign to Israel, the culture in the hospital, which Professor Beyar created, and Professor Halbertal and Professor Yuda Hovers, which leads the innovation and research division, are creating really a DNA for an hospital, which it's not every hospital, it's not the only one in the world, but when you come, and that's what attracted me to come from the center of Israel and to join the North, when I saw this culture of always pushing the envelope, always trying to be in the advanced translational research and innovation to bring patient care to the next step. I think this is one of the points that enables Rambam to be a good facilitator. The other thing is, a part of that, Rambam has some assets which are unique. Rambam created its own EMR system, electronic medical record, more than 20 years ago with his own developers. And the people that developed this EMR are the 5,000 workers in the hospital, the physicians, the nurses, logistics. And it's a different way of developing a database and taking into comparison Epic, which we all know 70% of the US market, was developed as a billing system that then migrated to a EMR. So we have that as a unique asset in the era that everybody wants to do AI in medicine, but actually data is king. And we know that data is really messy. So we are controlling the way the data is gathered. We created a very large biobank that goes along with this big data bank. So I think those are the assets that brings Rambam in a multinational, international level to be a good ambassador. The other thing is that needs are abundant. In every hospital, there are thousands of needs. They are lying on the floor. But what is scarce is time. Time is the most important asset that probably we have in our life, right? It runs, and biodesign is also a way of time management, of choosing the right choices, not going because your friend asked you to join his company before you're doing your due diligence and thinking, is it the right need to solve? So Rambam can benefit from the biodesign program internally as a facilitator, as a program, as a mechanism that can show those physicians and nurses and workers what are the milestones, what are the right way in the scarce amount of time that you have in order to take your needs that you're seeing and meeting every day to the next level. That's our problem. We don't have enough, even though we are a startup nation, we don't have enough of it. We didn't solve all the problems yet. So that's the Rambam point of it. I think it's a, and then as Rafi mentioned, then we're zooming out a little bit more to the Haifa ecosystem. Again, a unique place. Rambam is a tertiary hospital, has the largest community. It's 3 million people that it treats. It's the only tertiary hospital in Israel. So that's a big patient care resource. The other thing that most of the biotech companies in Israel are actually located in Haifa. So we have the biotech industrial park in Haifa. We have the Israeli MIT, the Technion, again, a leader in engineering. So all of it makes the Haifa ecosystem, again, a very well and a good choice to start from. What we envision, and maybe in the next question, I can tell a little bit more about what we are actually doing, but we envision bringing this methodology eventually to all of Israel and spreading the word to all of Israel in order to facilitate the resources that we have. The advantages in the Israeli ecosystem as a startup nation, we have a risk-taking culture. Maybe it's because of the survival culture that we came from, the Jewish challenges that we had before coming to Israel, then founding the Israeli nation surrounded by enemies. But a risk-taking culture, we don't need to teach our people that you shouldn't be afraid of taking risk, you should trial and error. The other thing is the affinity to technology. We have a lot of military graduates from elite units. And we don't have a lot of natural resources, so we invest a lot in brain resources. So technology is, again, a very big asset of Israel, if you're looking at a national level. What we lack is the methodology in health innovation. Israel is a startup nation, maybe in cybersecurity, in other high-tech industries, but when you talk to VCs in the Silicon Valley, they tell you, we are very pleased to work with Israelis, but when they come with a high-tech solution, it's much more mature than the health tech solution. And it's because we know that the health tech industry, it's a different ballgame. It's not the consumer electronics. You need to know a lot about the regulation and the reimbursement and the stakeholders. Your user, it's not the one that chooses to buy it. Maybe it's the physician that recommends it. So all of those challenges are actually highlighting a very big need to this startup nation. The methodology that is so needed, and the proven methodology, the Biodesign, is maybe the best educational health tech methodology in the world. So we are lucky that we have a chance to bring it to Israel.
Nice, great comments, and really excited to see how this evolves. Maybe just for the last panelist, Dr. Altman, you bring a really interesting perspective as well, because obviously you're trained on the program at Stanford, and now obviously had an opportunity to do a lot of work in Israel as well. So maybe you can cap us off before our discussion on your perspective and how Biodesign helps bring that gap between sort of the initial need all the way through to a potential commercial idea.
Yes, thank you, Josh. I actually miss Stanford. It's great to see you again. So one of the insights that you get actually after graduating from the Biodesign Fellowship is that you understand that if you follow the very methodological process of the Biodesign and carefully focus on the unmet need, you increase your chances to succeed. And I think especially in Israel, in times when technology is rapidly advancing in so many aspects, the real focus on the unmet need is so crucial. in Israel, people are very technology oriented. And this process stops you from running into solutions as long as the heart of the innovation, the need, is not perfectly understood and worked through. I think this as itself is crucial for commercial success. And I think this is shared also with all the fellows that deeply understand that. The Biodesign also equips, obviously, the fellows with tools such as stakeholder analysis, regulation, reimbursement, and IP protection. And those are all obviously critical building blocks for the successful medical device startups. And lastly, you have this Stanford Biodesign network, which is growing and becoming more and more international. And I think this assists you in any possible step from an idea, from the need to, if I'm in Israel and I need to understand the market in the US, I can call friends that I from the Biodesign community at Stanford or India or all over the world. And this is actually very, very helpful in any step.
That's great. Thank you so much. We've been speaking a lot about biodesign, but we actually haven't really summarized what it is. So for those of you that are tuning in and are sort of like, well, what is this thing? I'll just briefly give you a frame on it, and then we can actually discuss about how you could get involved whether you're from Israel or from Stanford in this exciting project. In short, the biodesign process is just a simple set of steps to go through from a problem all the way to a solution. And what the framework allows you to do is to, first of all, evaluate what problems are the most significant to address, and to do that rigorously, so that you make sure, as Yona pointed out, your time is the most valuable thing you have, more important than any other asset. So if you're going to spend your time on something, it better be something that really is meaningful. So choose well. Once you're past that process, then each particular problem can be expressed as a need, and the way you express that need actually has a very specific bearing on how you're going to solve it. And what's interesting here is there's a tremendous amount of innovation and insight that happens right in that initial need statement that actually defines the course for the entire project. And it's that insight that is embedded in that first, let's say, sentence that actually forms the DNA of what becomes later. And that is where a different perspective on that need can result in a completely other alternative solution that could be vastly better than another. So you want to really rank and prioritize those needs as well, looking for sort of, as we think about this, if we solve it this way, or we approach that need one way versus another, one would be better. Once you've identified your need of choice, you then spec it out. Just like you'd spec out a product, but in this case, we haven't invented it yet. What we're really doing is trying to identify what the outcome, the desired outcome, if we were to solve this perfectly, what would be the outcomes that we would be shooting for, and to really list those rigorously in terms of, what your expectations of solving this need would be. Again, trying to eliminate bias and keep it a pure statement of a need spec, as we would call it. That need spec becomes a foundational concept. And a foundational, you wouldn't go back and change it unless you learned that maybe you made a mistake, and that's okay, to learn things through the process and go back and change it for errors, but you shouldn't change it because you are having trouble solving it to that and sort of want to change what the problem was so that you can solve the problem you want to solve versus what the problem that actually exists. But that need spec serves as the foundation that everything else follows, and that's what you brainstorm to, that's what you'll throw your ideas against and screen your ideas against that spec for the one that has the potential to meet it the best. And then and so on through what then now starts to look like, how do you take an invention through the various steps of screening it and making sure that you can get it approved, do a reasonable clinical trial, raise the capital, have a business that makes sense so that you can attract investors, so that, the whole, ecosystem there is sort of the next step. But really the foundational work up front is what's going to define whether you even have a chance of success. So that's the biodesign process in a nutshell. What I might ask, because I think that this would be a really relevant question at this point, and while we're doing this, I'd encourage any of the attendees to write in some questions in the Q&A box below, and I'll try to use those to guide our discussion. But I'll just kick it off with a question for Professor Beyar or Dr. Vaisbuch. How does one get involved in Israel? If this sounds great, how will people be able to get involved in this program on the Israel side?
Initially take it and then ask also Yona to add. I guess, do you hear me? Yes, I think you hear me. First of all, obviously you have to have a group, a nucleus of people who will run the program, and Yona is building that. He'll explain. Then you need to build also a group of people from the industry, from the academia, to actually be mentors over the time, be advisors, be lecturers, and there was a tremendous acceptance of that. I mean, the leaders of the industry in Israel, medical tech Israel, is really, I don't remember one who said no. Everybody's enthusiastic, and every day somebody else joins this group, and Yona can attest to that. And then also, who can apply for that? I mean, it can be a physician, it can be a physician in training, it can be a student, medical student, or an engineering student, all 21 engineering student faculties from the Technion. It can be somebody from the outside. Yona can tell you how much already people who apply, he has it. The program has to start in October, very soon. And maybe I'll have Yona further, give more details about how we build this, how we intend to build. I'm sure we'll make mistakes, but and with your guidance, I'm sure we'll overcome them. So Yona.
Thank you, Rafi. So so maybe two parts to answer. To build our center and the initiative, bringing together hospitals, academy, and industry, we first made sure that we are taking our egos out, and the IP is owned by the students, owned by the innovators. In that way, we can establish collaboration with different institutions. So from the academy part, we establish collaboration with the Technion, with the Haifa University, with the IDC. It's another institution in the center of Israel. And we are, as we go, we continue and collaborate with more institutions. Either even the military of the medical corps in the Israeli army are joining us. From the industry perspective, we approached the Israeli leaders, the ones that already had startups, became big corporations and VCs. They've been all around. And as Professor Beyar mentioned, all of them gladly joined and are joining. We chose to approach the big corporates that have R&D, either divisions in Israel, or if it's an Israeli company like Medinol, which is big enough that as an R&D division, because we are interested in collaborating with the R&D part of the company, not the commercial side that sells maybe the products themselves. We got a very big attention from most of them, from Medtronic, the National Diabetes Division, from Philips, from GE, and other companies. Taking it to a practical level in Israel, who can apply and who is joining. So we are we are opening, and we started our first course of biodesign innovation, a full academic year course that is open not only to students, but mostly to students. We have in each group two clinicians, actually. So we decided to emphasize the need in the paramedical and in the nursing area of needs. So we are opening the clinician parts to both physicians and nurses. So we have two clinicians in each group, two engineers. They can be either hardware or software. We opened it to all the engineering faculties at the Technion. So we have from the bioengineering, we have from biotech, we have from computer science, from mechanical engineering, from everywhere. Excellent students that are applying. The application process actually ended 2 days ago. We have very fine applicants, and now we are in the screening process. The registration was opened across the board to all Israelis that want to apply. The ones that are students, we managed to have them get the academic accreditation. The ones that are not, and it's their choice. And we have physicians that already did MBAs in health and multidisciplinary applicants. So that's in a nutshell how you apply. We will in the next year we'll open more courses, and we'll enlarge our collaborations with more institutions and more hospitals as we go. But the first cohort will start this October. Between 6 and 8 groups will start, groups of 6. Each group will get a different need area, and hopefully there will be an interesting solutions at the end.
Great. And do you need to be an Israeli citizen, or can anyone across the globe apply to this program?
For the first year, yeah, we started as an Israeli citizen. We are working on trying to collaborate with our partners in Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, and India via our talented 2 GFITs, the Global Faculty in Training graduates, Dr. Nitai and Dr. Lior, that just graduated this June, and they created, as we say, the personal connections are the ones that are building the bridges. So they are creating this international collaboration, and hopefully we'll be able to do something more than that. We are participating in their courses as lecturers, talking about the ecosystem in Israel. And they are giving lectures about the Asia market from their part. So we already start to collaborate on an academic level. Hopefully the collaboration will take also part in the innovation and practical technological level.
And is this, sounds like it's a course that you can take while also having a full-time job, that this
Correct.
is a full-time fellowship setup at this point.
Right. The first course, the Biodesign Innovation course, we structured it exactly as at Stanford. It's 2 days in a week, bi-weekly meetings, evenings. So if you're an MBA student that already have a job, or you an engineer in Medtronic that wants to do the course and bring this to your division, you can do it.
That's great. And I will say, while there's an attraction to full-time fellowship and obviously an advantage to doing that, students in our 2-day-a-week course have gone on to create almost as many companies as our fellows have, and with equivalent success. So I think it's a great place to start. And I'll also commend you that the idea of using the fabric of your community to support is exactly what we did here at Stanford as well, pulling on the talent, really across the country initially, but for a large extent locally, which you have so many great resources and experience. And I think what you found is what we found similarly, which is so many people just want to give back. So many people want to help. It's an honor to do it. I think we all get into healthcare to help others, and to be able to help others is actually a really exciting thing. So good job in that, and very smart to also involve the local companies as well. It's a great ecosystem you have, and to take advantage of that power is tremendous. So very, very good.
Josh, this is Rich. I just want to add, I think just for the folks who are learning about biodesign, that part where you have engineers and doctors together is a key part. The multidisciplinary team is very important. And of course, Rambam has a great advantage because they have this tremendous engineering school, the Technion, nearby. But in the early part of the process, the doctors are basically teaching the engineers a lot about the physiology and the process of care. Towards the implementation piece, once we sort of have an idea of what we want to create, it's the engineers that take the lead and start teaching the physicians, and having business people involved is really key. So that's another important part, which is not obvious to everyone, that the multidisciplinary team is a key piece of biodesign.
Yeah, great point. And actually, I'll ask Dean Miner or you, Dr. Popp, how does one on the Stanford side get involved in this program in Israel at this point?
Go ahead, Rich.
Well, the people who are actually helping to start the program, that is the faculty like Janene and others, they have the ability to collaborate with and cooperate with Yona and help him to support the program. The students are coming from Israel, but the faculty and the mentorship will be happy to be a major part of that.
Great. And is there some programmed engagement from faculty already planned for Stanford faculty to be connected to, a class or two or something like that for the program that's going on in Israel?
Well, I believe Dan Azagori, who is one of the key leaders at the moment, is kind of taking the lead on that. And he's going to be the one to portion out who needs to be where at what point.
That's great. Cool. I'm looking here on some questions and encourage others to invite. There's a question about there's a observation that obviously the UAE and Israel relations have sort of improved, and a question whether there'll be opportunities for collaborate. This might open up a further avenue for collaboration between Israel and UAE as well through a biodesign-like process. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
Rafi, you've had some interaction with especially the people in the UK. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, you may know that Richard Horton came to Rambam and to Israel a couple of years ago, at times of actually troubled times of conflict, and he saw about the very unique culture here in Israel and the very unique texture of the people here. Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, everybody working together to save lives. I can tell you that also we have a lot of innovations also in the Arab world, in Israel, in Arab cities. In Nazareth, there is an incubator in Nazareth. They come up with great companies. They collaborate with the hospital. And we see a lot of interactions. And, the UAE story is a new one, and there's been a hype since in Israel since that announcement of possible collaboration. They have a huge interest in healthcare, specifically these days also related to data and COVID, but also to general healthcare and to investment in companies. So and to use of medical new. They love new innovations and medical devices. By the way, Corindus, which I founded, you remember the cath lab robotics. They have one system in UAE. They bought it. They paid 3 times more the money than any US center paid for a system like that. So I mean, but they do have a system there, and that's one example. They have many things, and things have been going under, without lots of publications over the years. Now it became public. But I think there is a great potential for expanding the collaborations worldwide. Now it's difficult times. The COVID really limits, but on one side, the world is more difficult. On the other side, communications with Zoom became so easier. Now we can communicate, do this webinar. We weren't using to do this kind of meetings before the COVID era. Now we're all used to that. So in a way, I hope it will also expand the collaboration. And when we can fly, we have scheduled, and we're looking forward to people from Stanford to come and visit us, participate in the Biodesign program here and other programs, vice versa from us going to, there is actually also a fund that helps to make this happen, that Lloyd was able to get for this Rambam Stanford collaboration. So there are lots of vehicles that we have to take with us, and will enhance this collaboration. And we look at that not only as a Rambam Technion Haifa collaboration. We look at first of all over the country, and also beyond the country. We have lots of, you mentioned whether we have people coming from, we have lots of trainees that come from many countries, whether Europe, China, the Far East, the Middle East, Palestinian Authority. We have at least 10 or 12 trainees at Rambam from the Palestinian Authority, neurosurgeons. One of the neurosurgeons, you have one of them, but there was also a neurosurgeon at Rambam from the Palestinian Authority. So I believe this will create a great opportunity for collaboration and for peace that we all hope will come to us, together with conquering the COVID territory.
That's a great hope. Couple of very logistics questions for you, Dr. Vaisbuch. A timing for ability to apply. It seems like the number of the folks listening in right now are interested. Is it too late? When's the next application deadline?
Yeah, so we just closed last week. We closed this cohort because we are starting with the first course. We don't have enough room to facilitate everything. But as you mentioned, we're going to grow. It's the pilot year. We are in an accreditation process with the Stanford Biodesign team along 3 years, closely being supported. We're gonna open more programs like this each year, and hopefully with collaboration with the Hebrew University, with the Jerusalem part that started a similar program already 7 years ago. We are thinking about starting a fellowship program. So there will be more opportunities to collaborate and to be part of it. And not every collaboration will be in the face of the course, but there will be other ways. Hopefully, we will be part of an MBA, MBA in health in Herzliya. There is a program that very interested in collaborating and incorporating the biodesign methodology. So we'll facilitate that as well.
Fantastic. I know we're just about at time. I wanted to give Dean Miner the chance for the last word, and then we can turn it back to Sharon.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for moderating the discussion today. I'm really excited about the progress we've made, and very excited about our future of the collaboration between Rambam and Stanford. And just would encourage everyone to stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourself, and take care of each other during these very challenging times.
Thanks so much. Back to you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Josh, for taking the lead on this super interesting conversation. I see we keep getting questions, but I want to mention to whoever still have questions about this program, whether it's at Stanford or at Rambam, you can always reach out to us, and we will make sure to facilitate a conversation between you and the people who are in charge of the program. and we'll be happy to provide more information if it's about registration, if it's about the investors community. Of course, if there are any companies that are interested to support any of those programs, again, please reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with the people in those two esteemed institutions for further discussion and collaboration. Once again, thank you so much for all the people who participated as speakers, first of all of our esteemed speakers, and of course the people on the other side of the screen, our attendees. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about international collaboration, innovation, and of course about those programs, the Stanford Biodesign program and the Israeli one, and how that is going to change our perspective on medicine and medical technologies on one hand, and then of course on the investment and the design process. I just want to remind you that this session was recorded and it will be available later on today on the CICC YouTube channel. If you missed this conversation, if you want to share that with your friends and colleagues, please go to our YouTube channel and it will be over there. If you have any other questions about biodesign in general and how the business community and the medical community can collaborate, again, join us for further discussions about it in our future webinars. Thank you so much again, and I wish everyone lots of health and a great rest of the day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye now.